The things that made you feel strange growing up might be the most intelligent things about you. Not the grades, not the test scores, not the ability to answer questions quickly in a room full of people. The quiet, weird, slightly embarrassing things you do when nobody is watching. Those things. Because here is what psychology has been quietly confirming for decades. High intelligence doesn't always look the way we were taught it should. It doesn't always look polished or confident or socially easy. Sometimes it looks like talking to yourself in the car. Sometimes it looks like disappearing for 3 weeks into a topic nobody else cares about. Sometimes it looks like lying awake at 2 a.m. with a thought you can't shake. If any of that sounds familiar, stay with me. Because this video is going to feel less like a list and more like someone finally describing you accurately. Let's start with the one that gets people the most strange looks. You talk to yourself. Not occasionally, regularly. Maybe you narrate what you're doing while you cook. Maybe you rehearse conversations before they happen. Maybe you process decisions out loud even when you're completely alone. And at some point in your life, someone caught you doing it, and you felt genuinely embarrassed. Here is what was actually happening in those moments. When you speak your thoughts aloud, even to no one, your brain is forced to organize them in a way that silent thinking doesn't require. Silent thought can be vague, looping, unfinished. The moment you put it into words, real words, spoken out loud, you have to commit to a structure. You have to find the language. And in finding the language, you clarify the idea. Psychologists call this self-directed speech, and the research is consistent. People who use it process problems faster, stay more focused under pressure, and regulate their emotional responses more effectively. Children do it naturally as they learn. The fact that you never fully stopped is not a quirk. It's evidence that your brain is still doing the work most people outsource to habit. You kept the process alive. That's not strange. That's how sharp minds stay sharp. Now here's the one that probably hurt more than it should have. You have always felt slightly outside of things. Not in a dramatic, lonely way necessarily. Just off to the side. Observing more than participating. Noticing things that others seem to walk right past. Feeling like conversations stay at a surface level you find genuinely difficult to sustain for long. And for a long time you probably interpreted that as a problem with you. Like you were missing something the rest of the world had figured out. But here is the psychological reality of what's happening. Heightened self-awareness and strong observational ability, both markers of high intelligence, fundamentally change how you experience social situations. Where most people are simply inside the moment, you are simultaneously inside it and watching it. You notice the subtext. You track the inconsistencies. You sense the unspoken tensions that nobody is acknowledging. That level of processing doesn't make social situations easier. It makes them more complicated. And it can leave you feeling like you're playing a slightly different game than everyone else in the room. That's not a flaw. That's the price of perception. And the people throughout history who saw what others couldn't, who questioned what others accepted, all paid some version of that same price. The feeling of being an outsider and the gift of original thinking are almost always the same thing wearing different faces. Now, this next one is going to describe you embarrassingly well. You get completely consumed by random topics. Not a passing interest, not a quick Google, a full disappearance. 3 weeks on the history of a civilization nobody in your life has ever asked about. An entire weekend inside a subject that started as a casual question and became something you couldn't put down until you understood it completely. And then it shifts. The intensity moves somewhere else. And the previous obsession settles into the background like a book you finished. Permanently part of you, but no longer urgent. This pattern has a name in psychology. It maps directly onto a personality trait called openness to experience. One of the most consistently identified characteristics of high-functioning, intellectually curious minds. It reflects a brain that doesn't just collect information, but genuinely needs to understand. To to go deep, to find the edges of a thing. Most people learn what they need to function. High curiosity minds learn because the not knowing is genuinely uncomfortable. The rabbit hole isn't a distraction from real life. It is how your mind makes sense of real life, one deep dive at a time. Here's the one that sounds the most like a problem until you understand what's actually going on. Your best thinking doesn't happen when you're trying to think. It happens in the shower, on a walk, right before you fall asleep, at 3 a.m. when you should absolutely be unconscious, in the middle of a conversation about something completely unrelated. And when it happens, when the idea arrives fully formed from somewhere you weren't consciously working, it feels less like thinking and more like receiving. That's not random. That's your brain's default mode network, doing exactly what it was built to do. Here's what's happening beneath the surface. When you step away from a problem, when you stop forcing it, your brain doesn't stop working. It keeps processing. It draws connections across everything you've absorbed, everything you've experienced, everything you've been quietly turning over without realizing it. And when those connections crystallize, they surface as insight. The harder you try to force creative or complex thinking, the more you actually interrupt this process. The breakthroughs come in the spaces between effort, which means that the person who looks like they're doing nothing, staring out a window, going quiet mid-conversation, zoning out in the middle of a meeting, might be doing some of their most sophisticated cognitive work. Your most productive moments have never looked productive. That's not a flaw in your process. That's the process. Now this one is important. You go quiet sometimes, really quiet. You pull back from people. You stop posting. You decline invitations. You spend long stretches entirely inside your own head. And from the outside, it can look like withdrawal or sadness or disengagement. But from the inside, it feels like something you genuinely need. Like your brain is running a process that requires the noise to stop. That's because it is. Intrapersonal intelligence, the capacity to understand your own inner world with clarity and depth, requires solitude the way a photo requires a dark room. The development can't happen in the noise. It needs stillness and time and the absence of other people's input. Highly introspective minds don't recharge in crowds. They recharge in silence. And the quiet phases you move through aren't emptiness. They're integration. Your mind is connecting things, making meaning, settling into understanding that couldn't happen while you were busy being present for everyone else. The people who know you might worry when you go quiet. But you know the difference between the silence that signals something is wrong and the silence that means something is being built. Trust that difference. And finally, this one, which might be the most defining of all. You ask questions that other people find uncomfortable. Not because you're difficult, not because you're trying to challenge anyone, but because your brain genuinely cannot accept surface-level answers to things that feel fundamentally unresolved. Why do we experience consciousness at all? What does it actually mean to be a good person? What would have to be true for everything I believe to be wrong? Why do humans do the things that are clearly worst for them and call it free will? People who don't think this way sometimes experience these questions as exhausting or pretentious. But for you, they're not optional. The questions arrive on their own. The discomfort of not knowing is real and persistent. This is what genuine intellectual curiosity looks like from the inside. Not the performance of being smart. The actual compulsion to understand. To go deeper than the available explanation. To hold the question open longer than most people are willing to. That compulsion is one of the most reliable signs of a mind built for real thinking. Not because it guarantees answers, but because the willingness to sit with difficult questions without forcing a premature resolution is exactly what original thought requires. So here is what I want you to sit with. The things that made you feel too much, too strange, too inside your own head. The self-talk, the obsessions, the nighttime ideas, the solitude, the questions nobody else was asking. None of those were signs that something was wrong with you. They were signs of a mind that was working properly, deeply, in ways that don't always look like what we were taught intelligence is supposed to look like. You were never too much. You were just a lot, and there's a difference. If this felt like someone finally describing you accurately, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below with the one that hit closest to home. I read every single one. See you in the next one.